No mai, haere mai, welcome to the studio. I'm Monique Bradley and it's a real honour to be the facilitator of tonight's chat on the Diabetes New Zealand page and all the other channels that we're watching on tonight. It is a real honour to be your host. It is in fact Diabetes Action Month, and following on from our Facebook Live last week on diabetes distress, tonight we're discussing the effects of COVID-19, how that's really affected those people living with diabetes. And I could just hear myself in my ear, so I'll just pop that out. It's been a really tough year for everyone this year, and particularly for people who are challenged living with diabetes, with the changing routines that have happened and through lockdowns, the increased stress that many of us have experienced, and of course for those living with diabetes, that heightened risk and even that element of fear of severe illness from COVID-19. So tonight we wanted to open up the conversation, give you guys a voice, let you be part of the conversation. And we have some incredible experts and people with lived experience as well who have been really challenged with diabetes this year or have been helping people with diabetes. So first of all, I just need to check on one thing. I've just got a feedback in my ear there.
Yeah, I've got it too.
So to help open up the conversation, this is going to be a really interesting chat tonight. To help open up that conversation, I do have over in Australia, we're going to beam you in. We have the director of the Australian Centre for Behavioural Research and Diabetes. Kia ora to you, Jane Spate, over in Australia. Let's see if we can pop across to Australia right now and see you there on the feed. We're going to pop across. There we go. Hi, Jane.
Good evening.
Kia ora to you. I'll be able to hear you very soon. I just need to change a setting of my earpiece, but that's going to happen. And then we also have on the chat tonight, we have further down the line, we've got Rachel Woodrow on the chat. Now, Rachel is incredible. What a brilliant story. Former type 2 diabetic, and I'm hoping tonight she's going to tell us now as a lifestyle and wellness advocate a few of her amazing tips and tricks on how she's been able to reverse type 2 and is living a really healthy and super well life. Great to see you on the chat tonight as well, Rachel. Thank you for being with us. And here in Auckland, awesome to see you here. We have Liz here, Liz Dutton in the studio. Liz is in fact the service manager for Diabetes New Zealand. So you've been on the phones, chatting to people,
yes,
finding out what they need and helping them get through this challenging time.
Absolutely.
Thank you for being with us tonight. So we are going to jump straight into the questions, but we also do encourage you to be part of the chat too. I have a computer, in fact, right beside me, and I can see all your questions coming through. And if you have anything that you want to share, be part of that conversation. Feel free to share your questions, and time permitting, we'll actually go to the feed tonight and answer those questions. And I will do my very best to direct the right questions to the right people on your behalf. So we are going to dive straight into a really big topic tonight, and that's all around a recent survey that was produced by Diabetes New Zealand. It was the Diabetes New Zealand Emotional Wellbeing Survey, which was carried out in October, and this investigated the emotional burden of people living with diabetes and also the effect of COVID-19 on the diabetes community. Now, this included everyone, people living with type 1, people living with type 2, and those who are finding it challenging living with gestational diabetes as well. Now, what really got me, so reading through the survey found that COVID-19 had an incredible impact on a lot of people living with diabetes, with 39% of people surveyed feeling more burned out by the constant effort to manage your diabetes. 47%, in fact, experienced or increased or new feelings of stress, worry, feeling sad, feeling down, and 30% of those people felt more alone with diabetes due to the effects of COVID-19. Now, Jane, I'm going to throw a question straight to you first of all. Jane, as the Foundation Director of the Australian Centre for Behavioural Research and Diabetes, you've led a program of work in Australia that aims to understand and improve the quality of life and self-care of people with diabetes. An incredible job, you're doing great work. So when we look at that study, and it says that 47% of people were worried about their diabetes because of COVID-19, First of all, how does this compare to what you're seeing over there in Australia?
Well, thanks for the question and the opportunity to be talking with you this evening. We've got a couple of sources of data this year during the COVID pandemic. So one of them is a snapshot survey that we conducted with Diabetes Australia through their National Diabetes Services Scheme helpline. So this is a national helpline that anyone with diabetes can call about any particular issue that they may be having. And often it's just about something like their registration card and needing to get more information about where they can get supplies and so on. So they wouldn't necessarily be calling about their mental health. But we surveyed people calling into that helpline over a 2-week period in May and June earlier this year. And we asked about 500 people, which was most of those who were invited took part, 3 key questions. So we asked them to what extent were they feeling burned out by the constant effort of diabetes, and about a quarter of them told us that they were. We asked them how worried they were about their diabetes because of COVID-19, and again about a quarter of them told us that they were worried about that. So that's about half of the number that you've seen over in New Zealand, which is quite a significant difference, obviously, but we do need to appreciate that there's, differences in why people are responding to the survey, how they're accessing it between here and New Zealand, and indeed probably the type of diabetes that they have and how they're being affected by things. So obviously there's potentially a lot of differences in the experiences that people have and that are informing those results. But that is, you asked me what the comparison was, and that's it. That we've seen about a quarter of people saying that they're particularly worried about their diabetes because of COVID. And what we also asked people was the extent to which they were feeling alone with their diabetes. And we found that 20% of people, so 1 in 5, were telling us that they were feeling alone with their diabetes during this COVID pandemic. And obviously that's very concerning with the restrictions that have been placed on people. And importantly, I should point out that at that point that we were doing this survey, it was during May and June, so we'd finished our first lockdown. A lot of the main concerns that there were earlier in the year around COVID had diminished to some extent, although people were still living with some of the restrictions and the worries. And importantly, just before that, in the UK, and I'm sure you saw the same on your news media in New Zealand, there were studies, findings released in the UK that reported that around 1 in 4 people dying of COVID in the UK had diabetes. So that's a particularly worrying statistic for anyone living with diabetes to be confronted with, regardless of whether that's on the other side of the world or not. When you don't have very much exposure or understanding at that point of this virus, and you're then seeing that people on the other side of the world are more at risk of severe infection if they get COVID-19 and indeed death, then that's very concerning. So, of course, this is having a major emotional burden on people, and it's surprising that it's not having more emotional burden, to be honest.
Right. That's a lot to unpack. It's a lot to unpack. So without getting too much deeper, thank you for sharing such insight. That's really incredible. To come back to the studio now very quickly, what would you say that people perhaps who are struggling with their concerns with this situation, what do you think they should be doing to ease those concerns? And we are going to jump back to you in just a second. We're just going to pop back to you.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought you were going
there you are.
Yeah. Look, I think the important thing is to acknowledge that these are valid concerns, and people with diabetes need to know that they have an organisation such as Diabetes New Zealand on their side. So the communications coming out of your organisation, but also from other health professionals and people in the community more broadly, need to be empathetic and understanding that people are already living with a difficult condition. It's a challenging condition to live with on a day-to-day basis. People experience diabetes distress and other burdens on their emotional well-being routinely through living with this condition. And at this particular time, they have an added burden of the concerns that they have for their health and, of course, the health of their loved ones through the COVID pandemic. So the support that we can offer people is, critical at this time to help them to manage their concerns and to manage their health risks as well as those emotional reactions. And I assume that through Diabetes New Zealand, you would have peer support groups that people can access both online and potentially in person as well to help them with that feeling of isolation of living alone with diabetes. So I think all of these are ways in which we can support people as best as possible at this time.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing all that fantastic information, and we're going to dive a little bit more deeper into all of that very shortly, but we are going to jump to you here in the studio, Liz. So thank you so much for being here with me and being part of this conversation. I think you're hands-on with everybody. You're part of the Diabetes New Zealand team. You're answering the 0800 number calls and utilising your experience as a former clinical nurse specialist. That's my understanding in diabetes. So from your perspective, with what you're hearing on the phones this year, what do you think people with diabetes found particularly challenging?
Well, we had, during the first 2 weeks of the lockdown, we had just an incredible number of calls and emails from people who were really concerned about potential risk to insulin supply, to employment issues and finance and how that was going to go forward, how they were going to access a diabetes care team and support groups that they regularly attended.
Right.
So these issues came to the fore initially, but we did find that the primary concern for most people was around going to the physical workspace.
Right.
So for the essential workers during level 4 and also the perhaps non-essential workers during level 3, raising huge concerns about how they felt at risk of getting severe complications should they catch COVID.
Right. That's huge. That's a huge amount of stress. And what, because they're carrying that level of stress as well, were people then starting to see changes, say, in their blood sugars, changes in their health, changes in all of their behaviours?
Absolutely, because any form of stress impacts diabetes. Blood glucose levels will always go up when you're under stress. And so it becomes a vicious circle, really. As soon as you become stressed about your ability to work and bring money home, then your blood glucose levels go up, and then you start to worry about your diabetes control. So it becomes a bit of a never-ending vicious cycle, really.
So true. So if you've just joined us, by the way, thank you, Liz. We're going to dive into that a little bit deeper. We are talking tonight about the effects of COVID-19 on those of you who are currently living with diabetes. And of course, this all affects your friends, your family, your community, really. And in the recent Diabetes New Zealand Emotional Wellbeing Survey, they did discover that 56% of people with diabetes were concerned about their risk of severe illness from COVID-19. So if this is the first time you're hearing this information, you can also go to the Diabetes New Zealand website. There's all the information there on the site for you. So Liz, with people who are living with diabetes, who are still a little bit worried of those effects of what's going on with COVID-19, what can people do to look after themselves and reduce the risk?
Yeah, sure. I think first and foremost, we have to be mindful of the fact that it is about if you catch COVID in the first place. So though people with diabetes are no more at risk of catching COVID than someone without diabetes.
Right.
So that's the first point I'd like to make.
Yes.
So if we're talking about severe complications of COVID itself, my advice really would be to prevent it in the first place, would be one.
Yes.
And two, to really look after yourself. So that going back to following the Ministry of Health guidelines in terms of mask wearing on public transport, but also in places where you can't socially distance, like in the supermarkets. The other thing that often comes to my mind is telling friends and family, if you're sick, don't come anywhere near me. You know, it's so easy to spread
self-protection.
bugs. Absolutely, self-protection. And also friends and family should be able to understand that they're wanting to protect you as well. So on top of that, really, one of the things we do know from research is that HbA1c blood test, the lower it is, the less risk of severe complications from COVID. So that said, by eating healthily, going for that daily walk, taking your medications as prescribed, will all help to reduce the risk in the first place. So all that healthy lifestyle stuff will go towards helping to improve the risk.
Oh, look, I totally agree. From the chat that we had last week in the live stream, talking about the effects of routine and self-compassion, looking after yourself, and talking about the effects on your blood sugar levels and your overall well-being, there seems to be, everyone we've spoken to so far is speaking the same language. So looking after yourself is really
Absolutely.
key to sailing through this, what has been a very challenging year. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Right.
And I think we must be mindful of the fact that although it's very easy to say, eat healthily, take that daily walk and all the rest of it, it's not an easy thing to do. And that's the challenge. And I think during lockdown, that was a challenge for a lot of people.
I would agree. I would agree. So to jump into that level of conversation, before we do, I do want to urge you, if you do have any stress going on, if you are struggling with your own diabetes, if you are struggling with the symptoms of diabetes distress, you can reach out and ask for help. You need to look, you can call a free call or text 1737 and talk to a trained counsellor. They're there anytime, day or night, and look at the, take a look at the diabetes.org.nz website there. If you are looking for some help, some information, you can get all that information from the website as well. Right, we do have another guest as well. Oh, no, we've stopped that. We've just had a few challenges with technology tonight, but we're here with you guys. I'm going to go straight to the news feed now and have a look at what's happening tonight with the conversation online. Lots of people saying hello, which is wonderful. Please keep your questions and your comments coming. It's great to see that people. Nathan Gain has just said it's been amazing being able to reduce metformin, which is fantastic, and has made massive changes in exercise and healthy eating, so that really supports the conversation we were just having, which I think is brilliant, and lots of people congratulating you on that, which I think is wonderful. Remember too, you can be part of this conversation and send in your questions. We all have either personal connections to people with diabetes, we all have family, friends, or we've experienced it ourselves firsthand. So these live streams are designed to help you have a voice, to be seen, to be recognised, and be part of that conversation. So I've just had a message that there's a brilliant question that's come in from David. I'm just going to refresh the feed there and make sure that I can have a look at that question. Happy to answer those questions and throw them to Liz tonight as well. Let's talk about some key lifestyle steps that people should be taking. I know we started diving into that conversation before, so just as my news feed refreshes there, let's talk about some key lifestyle steps that you would recommend for people who may be feeling a bit isolated, or maybe through COVID have had challenges with getting their routine back on track. What are the first sort of steps that you'd recommend to help them through that challenging time?
I think there are so many things that we try and think of when we're thinking about looking after ourselves, and I think the key is picking one at a time. You can throw too much at yourself, think I must I must look up on a meeting, I must go for, I must make sure I exercise, I must always remember to take every single medication I'm given. Often that's really hard to do. So focusing on one thing, and then when you know that you've got that nailed, moving on to the next.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That was very similar to the conversation we actually had last week as well. So for those of you looking for some ideas on how to manage your wellness one step at a time, I think is a great one. And it follows along with the fundamentals of self-compassion, loving yourself, looking after yourself, which we really started to highlight last week in our chat. I'm just going to bring those questions up now, and a question from David. David, I haven't forgotten you. You are right here. Everything just seems to be running a little bit slow in the chat tonight, so with you in just a second. And remember too, if at any stage anything resonates with you or you do need help, we do have all the information there at the top of the screen for you. All right, I can see these questions now. So David has just commented saying, yes, it is challenging living with type 1, but then not being able to work or go anywhere puts pressure on you. Also your partner, who's worked online right through, while her friend sat on the couch for us to feed and house us over lockdown, it destroyed my relationship with my partner. I am so sorry to hear that. That's additional stress. So are you hearing this sort of situation coming through on that 0800 number?
So you talking about, was that partner stress? I missed that, sorry.
Also my partner worked online right through, and the challenges on relationships. What have you seen firsthand?
I think it's been interesting when I've heard people talking about their relationships. Some people will say, actually COVID brought me closer to my partner, and some people absolutely loved lockdown, I heard, but then others found it more of a challenge. And I think if you're not the person who some people work together in a business, for example, and they're used to being together all the time. But I think sometimes for some couples, it becomes a lot more of a challenge to manage the space. I recall in my house, we had 3 of us actually online in different rooms of the house. And it was the only way we could manage it. And it was one thing that stopped any kind of relationship issues, talking over each other and that kind of thing. It's almost impossible if you have a small space and you're all working online.
So very true. Now I believe, do we just have a problem with the microphone? Is that what's happening? We need to adjust that. Sorry, we are live after all. This is live. Oh, no. I'm just going to keep you to stop that. We're okay? It's my microphone. Apologies for that, everyone. So remember, we are in a live environment. We can see your questions. We can see your chat coming through. The joys of being live. But that's what makes us all human, right? We're all in this together. So we do have that disclaimer there. We will be jumping back into our guests' experiences. We do need to share with you, however, that tonight there's no diagnosis happening. We have real people here sharing either their professional or lived experience with diabetes, and it's really important that if anything that you see, you hear is triggering for you, or if you are currently experiencing any stress, particularly diabetes distress, that you pop online and ask for help. You can do that by heading to the diabetes.org.n website, or you can free text or call 1737. Right, so we are going to dive a little bit deeper. So I believe it's all going on tonight. So tonight is all about you now, Liz, and you guys watching. That's what we're all about. Okay, so we've got some great questions. So thank you for your call. Great forum. I hope this will be taped and available for my friends who can't be watching tonight. The great thing about these lives is that they're all available on demand, so you can be part of the conversation while we're live, or post the event, you can actually watch it anytime. So please feel free. In fact, please do share this content, because it is all about you and it is about opening up those conversations. And I'll grab one more question. Oh, here's a good one. You may be able to help with this. Is there a support group in Christchurch who are not seniors or mums? Because I don't fit into that group. A very good question from Annette.
Not
Thoughts,
seniors
Liz?
or mums, okay. Diabetes New Zealand do not have a branch in Christchurch. They're an independent society. So for any information about any groups that are being run in Christchurch, you need to contact the local Christchurch Diabetes Society.
Great. So I hope you've got that, Annette. A very helpful tip there. So I will dive a little bit more now into diabetes distress. So in the survey, it was so sad to see that 39% of the people surveyed felt more burned out by the constant effort of trying to manage their diabetes. From your experience of being on the phone, talking to people, being in clinic as well, how would you frame what diabetes distress is? What is burnout? What are people seeing? What are they experiencing?
Well, both. With any type of diabetes, there is diabetes distress related to it. Diabetes distress, the burnout of having to check your blood glucose levels so many times a day, having to remember to take medications, whether it be tablets or whether it be insulin, so many times a day. We know that it takes about 160 extra thoughts in a day to manage diabetes than the average person who does not have diabetes. So if you take into account those extra 160 thoughts in a day, you can imagine how burnt out that you will get in quite a short space of time. You add on that lockdown, stresses around work, stresses around family and where money's coming from, then that just blows out of all proportion, really.
Of course. So it's a lot of added stress and strain. Now, I do believe on the chat we have a thunderstorm here in Auckland, and I've just realised it normally does affect things like the internet. So we are fighting against it. But I do believe that we have Jane in Australia. So we're going to get her back onto the feed. Hopefully we can bring her back in and ask her that same question. Jane, are you with us?
I am, yes.
Yes. Yeah, you made it. Fantastic. So, very quick question for you. If you can share with everybody from your clinical perspective as well, what do you see with diabetes burnout? How do people present? What should people be looking for? And how has COVID-19 really affected people with diabetes?
Yeah, it's a big question, and I think Liz has already. Can you hear me?
I sure can.
Yeah. So Liz has already given you some great examples of what contributes to diabetes distress. It is a lot about those self-care tasks that people have to do every day, whether that's medication taking, physical activity, monitoring diet, monitoring glucose levels, and so on. But it's also about the emotions that are linked to all of that. And it's not just about doing the things or even thinking about the things. It's the self-talk around it. So it's feeling that everything is very frustrating, that you can't get the glucose levels that you're looking for despite your best efforts with all of that self-care. It's feeling guilty when those glucose levels seem to be off track and you feel, well, it must be my fault then, I'm doing something wrong. It's feeling worried about low glucose levels and high glucose levels, worried about the risk of long-term complications and making that, a dominant part of your thinking and your feeling around diabetes. So all of those things contribute to diabetes distress as well. In terms of diabetes burnout, it's really at the extreme end of that diabetes distress spectrum. So if we think of it, as a continuum, we've got, people at various points will be getting on with their diabetes quite well, feeling okay about it, feeling on top of it. But as Liz has pointed out, there's various stresses and strains of everyday life. And of course, at certain times in living with diabetes, whether that's changing medications, being diagnosed with a new complication, just feeling overdone with diabetes, with everything that it it brings about that can push people towards that far other end of the spectrum where they're just feeling like they're really over having diabetes and they're really feeling overwhelmed by it, feeling like they're failing, feeling quite hopeless with it. And it's there where we start to see, some of those words coming in like failing and hopeless that start to push more towards what you might think of as depression. So diabetes distress and depression are distinct emotional burdens, but there's clear overlap when you get to that far end of the spectrum where people are just feeling that they just can't deal with it anymore. And it's really important that they get support well before that stage, but particularly if they're at that stage and they recognise it or someone recognises it in them, it's really important to try and get some support for that. And diabetes health professionals and organisations like Diabetes New Zealand are well placed to understand the stresses and strains that come with diabetes and how people are feeling, so that it's really important that people realise that they're not isolated in feeling like that, they're not on their own, that many people, as your survey has pointed out, many people feel this way. So it's really quite normal to feel like that, actually.
Literally all in this together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. So I guess Jacinda was right, team of 5 million. It's really a whānau of 5 million, I think. And of course, with you being in Australia there, Jane, as well, extended family across the ditch as well. Everybody, even globally, is affected by the effects of the pandemic and also affected by living with type 1, type 2 or gestational diabetes. So thank you for sharing your insights. Now, my understanding too is, again, we have Rachel back on the chat. If you haven't met Rachel before, it's great having you on the chat there. She's just on the bottom of the screen, just popped down a little bit. Hopefully we can pop her up the screen a little bit. It's been a night of challenges tonight. But Rachel, just jumping into you, for those who haven't met you before, you were diagnosed some time ago, in fact 9 years ago, with type 2. Oh, she's popped out again. We're going to come back to you, Rachel. No worries at all. And in fact, what I'll do is I will in fact go to the Facebook feed, because then we know we've got some questions waiting there. Great questions, actually. Okay, Liz Bennett, who said, I can't watch tonight, but I'm working from home was great for me. Working in healthcare and having diabetes is pretty concerning. Now, this is a great topic, moving on from what we were discussing, Liz. I hope there is support for diabetics for looking after themselves. I am super careful when I walk into 3 different workplace, rest home being one. Again, you highlighted before people who are essential workers working through this situation. For those who have just joined the conversation, for anybody living with diabetes right now who might be concerned about the effects of COVID, do you want to just step them through again very quickly, the steps, those self-care and protection steps, because I think that's really relevant.
Absolutely. So we're looking at prevention really, because it's only if you catch COVID it becomes a problem to people with diabetes and the risks of them getting severe complications. So following the Ministry of Health guidance really, and wearing masks.
Right.
And especially on transport and in supermarkets where you can't socially distance. And making sure that you keep away from anyone that's sick. So asking your friends and family, actually, I don't want you to come over tonight if you're not feeling well. All the self-care things you can do for yourself, like eating healthy, going out for that daily walk that we're encouraged to every day during lockdown. Every day we heard, go out for a walk. And remembering and having some kind of methods to remind yourself to take your medications at the times that they're due. Now that can be a challenge for a lot of people in terms of if you take insulin a number of times a day, if you take tablets before or after food, those kind of things can be a real challenge. So certainly for tablets you could ask your chemist for blister packs to help remind you, so you have them all doled out and you remember when to take them. Another good reminder I've heard people often saying that it's really hard for me to remember to take my medication at night time before I go to bed. Well, I usually say, you take medication when you get up in the morning. Well, yeah, it's there by the side of me. Well, when you get up and take that medication first thing in the morning, why don't you put your nighttime tablets on your pillow so that when you go to bed, they're there and you don't forget them. It's little things like that that can kind of make a bit of difference.
Make a huge difference and give you a bit of normalcy through what has been an incredibly challenging year.
Absolutely.
Great.
Yeah.
I am going to jump back into the conversation with Jane over in Australia, because one of the things that you mentioned before, Jane, is the emotional effects, and we've had this chat before. The people living with the emotional burden of diabetes, and also the survey it showed that 39% of people. 14% of people really struggled with increased discrimination or the stigma of diabetes. And I don't think this conversation happens enough. I have family with diabetes, so I've experienced it firsthand. And Jane, from your perspective, I just want to know what your thoughts are around people dealing with that stigma as well.
That's a really good question. We've done a fair amount of research on diabetes stigma here in Australia, and we have identified that, anecdotally, we already knew that people often reported feeling stigmatized or discriminated against because of their diabetes, but we'd never really seen that in research until a few years ago. But we have identified that up to 2/3 of people experience stigma related to their diabetes. And I think it's often to do with misconceptions around diabetes, about about the limitations that there may or may not be on someone with diabetes because they have that condition. So the extent to which they might be able to do certain jobs or look after themselves in the way that other people can, or indeed whether having something like hypoglycemia affects their ability to do those kinds of jobs or self-care tasks or looking after a family and so on. And I think the media doesn't really help with any of this because there is a lot of emphasis on prevention of diabetes, and quite rightly, because we know that a certain amount of type 2 diabetes can be prevented or indeed delayed. But not all forms of diabetes can be prevented, and even amongst people with type 2 diabetes, not all of those people could have prevented their condition. So there is really a lot to be said for recognising that there are other risk factors other than obesity and overweight and unhealthy lifestyles associated with type 2 diabetes. Factors such as genetics and age, family history are really important as well. So I think we really need to be far more understanding as a society of the challenges that there are of living with diabetes, and be supportive of people trying to deal with those challenges, and never assume that we know what it's like to live with diabetes, or that we know that there must be certain issues or certain constraints on someone because of living with diabetes, because we actually don't know how well that individual is managing it until we ask. So I think it's really important to just be open and appreciative of how people want to manage their condition, not being blamed and shamed for having the odd treat now and again, and in particular in circumstances as we're all in this year, we all know what it's like to feel stressed, to feel a bit isolated, to feel a bit run down with all of the stresses and strains of the pandemic that are on all of us. And I think it helps us all to open our eyes with a bit of compassion to what it's like to deal with those kinds of issues on a day-to-day basis.
Totally agree. And I mean, the whole theme of this month is Love, Don't Judge. So that element of compassion, I think, it's something we all deserve, we all need, getting through this challenging time, and particularly for those of you who are living with diabetes. Thank you so much for that, Jane. Really valuable advice there. Now we do have, hopefully we can make it work now, we've got Rachel who's going to pop in. Oh, kia ora to you, Rachel. Thanks for hanging in there. And we've got you on the stream tonight. Welcome to tonight's chat. Glad to finally have you here. Now, for people who don't know, Rachel, I'm going to share very quickly a little bit of information about you. You were diagnosed with type 2 diabetes 9 years ago. You've made some incredible lifestyle changes, major lifestyle changes, and you've now successfully reversed your symptoms through those changes. Firstly, congratulations to you. It's a big job. I'm honoured to chat to you. I think you're fantastic. You're a real inspiration. So let's talk about those lifestyle changes first of all. I'd love to know, what are the key steps that you took in your diabetes journey, and particularly the journey to transform your wellness? Oh, I think we may have just... This weather's not being kind tonight.
First
Oh, are you there?
speaking now.
So we can't,
Can you hear me,
unfortunately,
Bea?
the weather, it's a stress for everyone tonight. So we will hopefully bring you a little bit more with Rachel. If not, we'll see if we can catch up with her later in the week and get her story out to you, because I'd love for you to hear a little bit about her journey, and also how she was able to reverse type 2. Obviously, that's a huge topic on its own. I will jump onto the Facebook chat and see how you are all going. Incredible. Very, very important question around diabetes here. Sarah Pacey's just asked, will we also have a type 1 guest speaker? Yes, we in fact had a type 1 guest speaker last week, Ruby McGill. She was absolutely amazing. The live stream is still on the news feed for the Diabetes New Zealand page, so you can watch that. Some incredible insight. Our goal with these live streams is to bring you people of every area of experience who are living with diabetes, as well as people like Liz, who is supporting people with diabetes, and people with professional expertise who can shed a little bit of light of helping everybody through this challenging year. Wendy McCormick, this is an interesting one. I'm learning so much. I stress so much with my diabetes. Is this common, Liz?
Oh, is it common? I think everyone stresses with diabetes. They stress because when they're diagnosed, they're told, you've got to look after yourself. You know, you've got to eat healthy, you've got to go for your walks or do other physical activity. You might be given a tablet to take, certainly with type 2 diabetes. We'll use that as an example first of all. But they're also made very aware early on that if they don't do all those things, they're likely to end up getting some of the long-term complications. So that immediately puts stress on people.
Huge
you
amount
know?
of pressure.
So sometimes I think as health professionals, you know, we need to talk about how yes, there is a risk of long-term complications, but actually they're preventable. And so putting a different spin on it, well, not putting a different spin on it, it's actually the way that we should all consider the journey with diabetes, is that it can be positive. I mean, Rachel is an example of that, obviously. Fantastic example. With type 2 diabetes, having to inject yourself from day one, that's a huge challenge to start with. So you've already got a change in lifestyle. You can't do anything without thinking about your diabetes. You can't have a snack, you can't have your lunch, you can't even go out for a walk without thinking about your diabetes in terms of testing what your blood glucose level is doing, in terms of injecting insulin or eating carbohydrate, depending on what the results of your blood test is. So all these things are a challenge going forward, but people with type 1 in addition have the same risk of complications as those people with type 2.
It's interesting to know.
And it's the other interesting thing that you pointed out, that you were talking about earlier on, because in your introduction you've been talking about type 1, type 2 and gestational diabetes.
Yes.
Only recently was I talking to someone about gestational diabetes. In fact, it was in a presentation I was giving. And I was talking about the stats that it's something like 80% of women who have gestational diabetes that will go on to getting type 2 within 10 years.
Wow.
Now, this particular woman who was there didn't even know that there was a risk of going on to getting type 2. So, but the point that I'm making here is that even that's preventable. It's preventable by doing the kind of things that Rachel was going to be talking about today. Sorry,
Rachel, that's
sorry.
right.
And thinking about how you can lead a healthy life and love yourself with that, you know? And it is all about loving yourself and wanting to take care of yourself that I think makes the difference.
I think that's such a huge message. It's such a huge message, and especially when we refer back to the survey statistics, where it seems that perhaps some of that self-compassion, that self-love is actually missing from not just this year, but society. Would that be fair? Or people particularly living with diabetes.
Absolutely.
Do we forget to love ourselves first often?
I think we do.
Wow.
And I think lockdown gave us so many extra challenges. I think to some degree, I think everybody almost forgot how to love themselves, you know. Everything was an additional challenge. So for people with diabetes, they have all their normal challenges, but suddenly there were a whole load more challenges they were given.
So what about the effects of isolation? Because that was a huge one through lockdown. And actually, Jane, I'll jump over to you as well and talk through that. For someone who has, say, been experiencing or just living and managing diabetes from day to day, and all of a sudden they are in that situation of they're in lockdown or they're in isolation, what are some key steps that they could perhaps take to move through that and support themselves?
Yeah, it's been a big problem for everyone this year. I think one of the key things that I've found, I'm very interested in the language that we use around diabetes. And then when we started talking about COVID, I was particularly interested in the language that was coming out around that. And of course, one of the key messages was social distancing. But the important thing was to be physically distant from people, not to be socially distant. And so I think actually across the world, we got that message wrong, that we shouldn't be socially distant. And I think we're now starting to realise that and appreciate that we do need our social interactions far more than probably most of us ever really appreciated before this year. But humans are social beings. So I think it's really important that we appreciate that we do, potentially need to remain physically distant from people, not have that physical connectedness that we are used to. But it's really important that we remain socially connected with people. So, using forums like this, whether that's a FaceTime call, a Zoom call, any means that you've got to pick up the phone and have a chat with, your neighbour or your family, someone that you usually work with, who you might usually have a cup of coffee with at lunchtime. Anything like that we can do to remain, socially connected with those people is really important, and it really gives a boost to your emotional well-being on a daily basis to have those connections. The days when we, spend isolated, just thinking. So that's the other thing that happens when we're not socially connecting with other people. The thoughts go around in our head rather than verbally, to and from. And when you talk with a friend, as you're already saying in the studio, is often compassionate and supportive. But when we talk to ourselves in our own minds, we're often quite harsh on ourselves. So it is really important that we're kind to ourselves, but that social connectedness can help us with that quite a lot. So yeah, absolutely. And if you don't have, the opportunities necessarily, if you don't have family, some people don't, and some people have been living on their own during this pandemic, and so literally are isolated from other people. Is there a neighbour or a friend that you can contact? And if there's not, then reach out to a diabetes, peer support group. Other people with diabetes are there and interested in having a chat with you about your experiences, and someone will be there ready to listen. So you really don't need to feel that you're on your own with this. And if you really don't have any of those connections, then do go and talk with a health professional. Your GP is there to support you, and your GP can also put you in touch with counselling, with mental health professionals if you feel that that would be useful and supportive for you to have that support. And I think I would just do a shout out to the psychologists and the counsellors out there for people with diabetes, because often people with diabetes don't realise that it's okay to go and talk with a counsellor or a psychologist about how they're feeling. It doesn't mean that they're mad or crazy. There's a lot of stigma still attached to mental health, but psychologists are really well placed to listen, to be a supportive ear through all of this, and they have a lot to offer in terms of supporting people and coaching people through what it's like to live with diabetes. There's someone on your side, so it's really important to reach out if you feel that you are isolated during this pandemic.
Jane, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. Utterly brilliant. Wonderful words there. So we are moving towards the end of tonight's live stream. So thank you, Jane, for being with us, and thank you, Liz. I do want to ask, to kind of sum up tonight, from your expertise working hands-on with people here in New Zealand, how do you think that friends, whānau, and the wider community can support people with diabetes who may be experiencing distress, maybe experiencing stigma, maybe experiencing just the emotional burden that COVID-19 has had on them and their health? What can the wider community do?
3 short words would sum it up. First of all, love, don't judge. So I would also say to people, learn about diabetes. Understand that it's not a choice. It's a lifelong, relenting condition that people actually suffer a lot of burden with. And those people, everyone with diabetes, really need love and support around them to be able to live well. And I think that's the key.
Wow.
So keeping it close to the heart.
Love, don't judge. Well, as Liz just said there, diabetes is in fact a lifelong, relentless condition. And as we're discovering through these chats, it's all about compassion, having an open forum for conversation, feeling safe to use your voice, to reach out for help. That's what it's all about. And that's what these conversations are designed to do. So for someone who, if you're living with diabetes currently, if you're not sure if you are, but you're showing some symptoms, you can actually reach out for help. You can head to the diabetes.org.nz website. There's the link there to see if you're at risk. You can take a test online and find out more. Of course, reach out to your healthcare professional, reach out to your GP, ask for some help. And if you do need any help at all or information, the Diabetes New Zealand website has a whole lot of resources and information on type 1, type 2 and gestational diabetes there, so you can learn more about the condition. And of course, I have to do a promotion for our awesome t-shirts that we're wearing as well. You can actually support Diabetes New Zealand if you're like me and you have family with diabetes and you want to do your part to support them and the support that Diabetes New Zealand gives out to people with diabetes. You can head there, you can buy these amazing t-shirts, Love Don't Judge. I love it, I wear it all the time. Designed by the wonderful people at Mr. Vintage. We love you guys. You can grab your merchandise from the website as well. Everybody needs one of these coffee cups. And of course that helps Diabetes New Zealand do this incredible work to reach out to the people who need help the most. That's what it's all about. Final questions from the newsfeed. I will have a quick look. People saying thank you so much. It's so great to have wonderful people coming into these chats with knowledge who speak to us, which is great. So thank you for that wonderful wonderful feedback there. And remember too, during the week as well, if you have questions, you can send them through onto these live feeds as well. And one of the team behind Diabetes New Zealand is more than happy to answer your questions during this. A very interesting question too. Now, I do like questions like this, or a comment, and it says, and it's good because, you know, we do have experts on the feed. If you listen, this Hayley has just said, if you listen to the speakers, you'll hear them say that you can reverse the symptoms of type 2. This is only the symptoms. You still have diabetes. It doesn't go away. A very interesting, very contentious question, but again, you guys are part of this conversation, and these are the types of questions we need to ask. Liz, thoughts on that?
There are many schools of thought on that, really. And yes, you can absolutely reverse the symptoms. Now, if we're talking specifically about type 1 diabetes, type 1 diabetes specifically cannot be reversed. It is a lifelong condition that's hard to manage. Type 2 diabetes, also hard to manage. In the early stages following diagnosis, prior to any damage being done, to any real lasting damage done potentially to the cells in the pancreas that manufacture insulin, it may be possible to reverse it in a sense, and through really good management, weight loss, healthy living, and so on. As people progress through, because type 2 diabetes is a progressive condition, which means that over time the picture of what's going on in the body gets worse. That's the natural progression of type 2. So over time, it, I believe, is more likely to be very difficult to turn things around completely. Certainly if there's any damage to those cells in the pancreas that manufacture insulin. So there are different schools of thought out there. They're my personal thoughts, that it may be easier in the early stages, in the early years when you're diagnosed, but as it gets longer and longer, that it's likely to be more difficult to make those kind of changes.
I'm actually really glad we've had that conversation, because I had no idea about that. So thank you for opening that up, because I know it is a very contentious subject for people living with diabetes. So I think this could open the doorway to a bigger conversation as well. So remember, that's what these live streams are about. Liz, thank you so much for hanging in there with our technological challenges. Jane over in Australia, thank you so much for being part of the chat. Really appreciate your input in tonight's chat. Thanks again also for hanging in there. The weather gods weren't kind to us. The thunder and lightning was not kind at all. So thanks for being part of that chat. We really appreciate your energy and your input. And finally, to everyone watching tonight, thank you all as well. Apologies if we didn't get to your questions tonight, but keep coming back. We have 2 more live streams this month. This whole month is all about the concept of Love Don't Judge. It is Diabetes Action Month, and we are all in this together. We're a whānau of 5 million, and we want you to be as part of this conversation as we are. So Jane Spate, Director of the Australian Centre for Behavioural Research in Diabetes, thank you. Thank you so much. Liz here with me, Service Manager at Diabetes New Zealand. Thank you. Thank you very much.
No.
And Rachel, who kind of popped in tonight, we will be back in touch with you, Rachel, because I really do want to chat with you and share your story. And thanks to all of you. Now, finally, if you do need help and support, remember there's information there at the top of the screen. You can call or text that number anytime, day or night, and there's somebody to help. And as always, you know, reach out, open up that conversation, and let's do this together. Love, don't judge. We'll see you guys next week for another Facebook chat with more amazing guests and real talk. I'm Monique Bradley. Ka kite anō, inohora.